the Kaaba. It is the focal point to which 5 times a day, every day of their lives, 700 million people turn to pray. It is a rough-built, empty cube of stone. Yet at the beginning of the 7th century, in pre-Islamic times, when Europe was deep in its own dark ages, this cube was stuffed with pagan idols and exploited by the privileged few to maintain a social order of hideous brutality. It is the duty of every Muslim to make a pilgrimage to Mecca at least once in a lifetime. In doing so, they follow the example of the man who threw out the idols and cleansed the Kaaba, the man through whom God revealed his great gift, the Quran, which is the foundation of the Muslim faith. The name of this man who changed the face of the world, is Mohamed, messenger of God. Mohamed, Messenger of God, is now also the title of an epic film. It has not been made by Hollywood, though it draws heavily on Hollywood's technology, techniques, and traditions. Indeed, it is a film that Hollywood said could never be made. Because of the Muslim taboo against idols, Islam would never permit a physical representation of the Prophet himself. But the story of Mohammed, of the triumph of his passionate idealism over violent persecution, has now been told by a Muslim filmmaker, Mustafa Akkad.
Well, I did the film because it is a personal thing for me. Besides its production values as a film, it has its story, its intrigue, its drama. Besides all this, I think there was something personal. Being a Muslim myself, who lived in the West, I felt that it's my obligation, my duty to tell the truth about Islam. Here is a religion that has a 700 million following, yet it's so little known about it, which surprised me. I thought I should tell the story that will bring this bridge, this gap to the West. Even though there were several attempts by the major studios to do a film about Muhammad, and they failed because they approached it from an angle that they were going to show the Prophet. And this is something very sacrilegious as far as Islam is concerned. They are very strict as far as showing the prophets, not just Muhammad. Jesus, Moses, they feel prophets should not be seen. But I felt I can do it because I understand the subject better and I can do it without showing the prophet. And I contacted a well-known scriptwriter, Harry Craig, who thought, like me, that it could be done.
My pleasure, my privilege in writing this film was, in fact, that I was writing into and against the ignorance of the world about this religion, about this man, about the Quran, about what Islam is and what it was. Well, this was easy because it's in the nature of the religion of Islam, because Islam was not a new religion. Muhammad, the whole principle is that what God said to Muhammad had been said to prophets before Muhammad, but people had turned away from it.
We have a script after 2 years, and we have the approval of the religious authorities, Al-Azhar University in Cairo, who stamped the script page by page. The next thing is to find a place to shoot the old Mecca, where the story happens. The new Mecca, of course, in Saudi Arabia now has skyscrapers and the modern changes that we could not shoot it there. So we searched for a place that resembles that Mecca.
Eit Bouchan is a small village in the foothills of the Atlas Mountains about 15 kilometers from Marrakesh. The setting and the scale of the village were perfectly in keeping with 7th century Mecca. But Mecca itself was a very wealthy town set at the crossroads of the major caravan routes of Arabia. So for the film, a splendid superstructure indicative of an entirely different economic status was literally grafted onto the foundations of the existing buildings. The bewildered inhabitants suddenly found themselves living on the ground floor of houses suitable for the wealthiest merchants of Mecca. They were encouraged to remain in residence, to give natural life to this artificial city. As extras, they people the picture. And as laborers, they were recruited to help with the construction of this dream that was resolving into a kind of reality around them.
We had 300 men, very unskilled, when we started the set. And after 4.5 months building, I must say they were very skilled. In many countries I've worked in, I must say that the fellows from Egypt are the best, and anywhere in the world I'd always like to have them again.
When Mohammed was persecuted out of Mecca, the city of Medina became his base and the site of the first mosque. This too had to be recreated. In both cities, 200 houses, 4 palaces, and 29 miles of wall. Demand for materials quickly outstripped supply.
Materials were quite a problem. The scaffolding tube was exhausted in Morocco. We had to go to a company which imported from France and Italy. In all, we had over 500,000 meters of tube and hundreds of thousands of fittings. Plaster, we had a hell of a problem, waiting for factories to work through weather conditions.
After 3 months of building, the tail end of a hurricane blew itself out on this plaster Mecca and reduced it to rubble. It was a foretaste of the film's difficulties, but also of the determination that was to surmount them, as these 2 cities of ancient Arabia began again to take shape to the designs of Tanby Larsen and Maurice Fowler.
In doing a picture set in this period, which is about the year 600, we've been very lucky in one way that not a great deal is known about it. So what research we have done has been fairly easy, but for the rest of the designing I've had to use my own imagination, which has been much more interesting than having to follow things written in books.
With the buildings complete, they had to be furnished and dressed, with objets d'art, bric-a-brac, and all the paraphernalia of life in a prosperous trading city of the 7th century.
In finding all the props that we needed in this country, we had to search quite a long way, and some of the things we wanted, of course, weren't available here, so quite a lot of the props we've had to manufacture ourselves. We brought some very fine prop makers with us, or we've had to have things made locally to the designs that we needed for our period.
The pagan idols, which were the objects of Mohammed's especial contempt, were prevalent everywhere in Mecca until the Prophet's triumphant re-entry into the city to destroy them. And 11,000 arrows, 1,000 bows, shields, swords and spears for the 2 armies that fought bitterly for or against Mohammed, all of these had to be made in workshops set up for the purpose. This ancient world was recreated in the course of 4.5 months around the inhabitants of 8 Bouchon. But Islam is their living faith, and distant Mecca is the focus for their daily prayer. And when they realized that this symbol, the Kaaba, was now standing in their own village, and that the village itself had been transformed into ancient Mecca, their astonishment turned to awe. The arrival of camera, crane, and lights restored the balance between illusion and reality in favor of illusion. The team of Oscar-winning technicians had arrived to look at and to feel their own peculiar way round this world that Tanby Larsen and Maurice Fowler had created. They would be working in it for the next 13 months to make the illusion on film as complete as possible that this is Mecca, that the date is 610, and that this was where Mohammed was born and lived, in the making of one of the major religions of the world.
Make a mark there if that's at all possible. We'd like to have something down there for you to smash.
The sets were now ready for the actors who would give the illusion of living in them. But before they appear, they have to be dressed appropriately. That was the task of costume designer Phyllis Dalton, who clothed the populations not only of Mecca and Medina, but also of the courts of Abyssinia, Byzantium, Persia, and Egypt, and the armies that fought for and against Mohammed.
A small number of principals' costumes were made in London, and a certain number of others were made in Madrid. And the rest of them, we've purchased the material in Morocco and have made them ourselves. I think one does have to have a sympathy and a rapport with actors, because I think it's terribly important that you give them clothes to wear that they can then forget about. And if they're happy and comfortable in their clothes and forget them, then their performance will be more convincing, and then you help them and your director.
And as my lady can see, ravished to the eye.
Yes, 7 lengths.
20 dinar.
Abu Sufyan's wife. 15.
I wanted to do 2 versions, one in Arabic and one in English, with complete separate cast, because Arabic and English are 2 separate and different languages. You cannot dub Arabic into English nor English into Arabic. It's very difficult for the lips movement. And when I budgeted the film, I budgeted on the basis that the Arabic version will be extra few takes. But I was wrong. It took us much longer, and there is no way you can learn this from anybody else, because this is the first time done. Because the style of acting in the Arabic is a bit different. It's more dramatic, more poetic, more lengthy. And so we had to change all our style as far as camera setups and lighting setups, and so it wasn't as easy as we thought it would be.
خز من الصين يا سيدتي. ناعم الملمس. متعة للعين.
نعم، 7 أطوال.
20 دينارا.
لزوج أبي سفيان.
خذيه بما شئت يا مولاتي.
15.
The presence of Mohammed himself pervades the whole film, but his is a presence the audience is cleverly made to sense without seeing. The leading human character we do see is Hamza, Mohammed's uncle.
When he meets unarmed men, Mohammed is a liar. Liar? You don't let him speak. Where's the lie and where's the truth?
He's played in English by Anthony Quinn, and in Arabic by Abdullah Reich. The central personality clash of the story is between Hamza and the leader of the respectable merchants of Mecca, Abu Sufyan, played by Michael Ansara, and Hamdi Reich. The conflict is fomented by the passionate hatred of Hamza by Abu Sufyan's wife, Hind, played by Irene Papas and Mona Wassef. The African slave Bilal, one of the heroes of Islam, was the first muezzin. He was one of the first disciples of Muhammad and is played by Johnny Secker and Ali Salam.
But here we find ourselves in a situation where 2 actors have to do the same scene, exactly the same scene, but with 2 different languages. They both are afraid of each other. At the beginning, the spirit of competition was there. And I didn't want them at the beginning to watch each other, because I didn't want anybody to be influenced by another. I want every actor to give his own interpretation to the part. But then I found out that it was very healthy to really watch each other. And by doing so, I realized that it created such an atmosphere of cooperation. The actors were getting along together fine. They were getting together before the set, and they were viewing the part. And I thought, this is exactly what I wanted to do. This people, the contact of people, understand each other and getting along fine. This is exactly the purpose of the whole film.
I think film acting is very difficult. I think all acting is very difficult, but I think film acting on a film of this size is particularly difficult, because very easily the actor can feel remote from what is going on. Sometimes he isn't called for weeks, sometimes he does his scenes out of order, and the very size of the unit itself is an enormous strain on the actor. I think always playing historical characters is very difficult, because you, as it were, have a responsibility towards the people who you play, even in the remote past. And in this case, for the English cast, it is doubly difficult because the Arab cast is so aware of each character, aware of their idiosyncrasies. And it's very interesting how different people have reacted to their doppelganger, as we call them, in a way that...
The Prophet has seen you. You're not to rope or drag the prisoners. Let them rope us. Cut them loose. I said cut them loose. And give them water. And share your food.
The only part that wasn't played by two actors was the part that wasn't played by an actor at all. Director of photography Jack Hildyard explains.
We devised a technique in which we use the camera as the prophet. And all actors who are playing to the prophet look directly at the lens of the camera. We have found that sometimes the prophet had to move, stand up or sit down, and we use our camera just like another actor in the picture.
What is the Prophet of God doing? Carrying bricks, eh? Give me that. Look, you are doing too much. Please, go and sit down. We'll do it.
So it is through the camera that the audience experiences something of what Mohamed experienced in relation to his fellow men, from the low point of his being stoned and persecuted out of his own city to the high point of his triumphal re-entry at the head of a peaceful march by the thousands of followers who had joined him in exile.
Now came the big move, to move to the port of Tripoli. We had tons of clothes and armaments and equipments and vehicles and even horses that we have trained. Of course, Tripoli is not a city that is used to filmmaking. It doesn't have the film facilities, the sound stages, the equipment. So we have to start all over again, to rebuild sets. And above all, to find a base for our equipment. We looked and we found an old warehouse for storage of tobacco, and we turned it into an interior sound stage. We had to soundproof the sound stage, put scaffolding for lights. But then in the end, we had in our hands a good sound stage, as good as any place you find any place.
The palace of the king of Abyssinia, the Lion of Judah, a Christian who gave asylum to some of the earliest persecuted Muslims.